India is not enamored of this ISIS, and they've got very few recruits, and there's been fair amount of resistance to it. But whether it will continue or not, we can't be sure. Because of events, some things can change. There are portions of our country where it can grow very fast, particularly in areas where the Muslim population is in majority, such as in Kashmir, or in Assam in some districts, or in Kerala in Malappuram. But by and large, we have, at the moment, the ISIS presence in India is very little. But it can grow because of the fact that Pakistan has a network. Pakistan has counterfeited our currency, and therefore financing the operations within India with the rupees, counterfeit rupees, or bogus currency of India, they can create an organization. So this first thing that they are trying to do is this. Second thing ISIS is trying to do is to try and bring Lashkar-e-Toiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Hezbollah, the other groups, they bring them all together into one unity. Because they say, we are the government. Others are terrorist groups. We are the caliphate. And all Muslims anywhere in the world are citizens of this caliphate. And al-Baghdadi is the caliph, and they are issuing currency notes, they are issuing passports for travel within the areas where they are in control. So therefore, they are now trying to bring together these groups created in Pakistan for purpose of terrorist attacks, which was Pakistan created for terrorist attacks on India, that they are trying to unite and create. So this is the second step. The first step, as I said, that ISI network, Pakistan's ISI network within India, and the counterfeit currency system that they have built up very successfully, especially with thanks to the fact that there's so much black money in our country, and the Hawala agents essentially also come from elements which are sympathetic to Pakistan, or at least they cannot do business unless they are supportive of Pakistan, especially if the Hawala operations which are done in Dubai require the Pakistani support. So with using all that network, the ISIS is trying to take it within their control. Second is to bring these existing terrorist groups together into one terrorist group. The third thing they are using very effectively is the social media for recruiting people. And that is having effect not only in India, but in the United States and Europe too. And the social media, the propaganda that is let loose, the lies that they spread, these affect the vulnerable young people in their teens, and young people who would not know the background from personal knowledge. They become affected by it, and then through that they recruit them. So that process has started in India. We have found as far away as Rameshwaram in Tamil Nadu, across Kashmir and Kerala, ISIS has been able to get a few recruits through the social media. Some of them have gone and fought along in Syria, and then they have come back claiming that they are disillusioned with the ISIS. But we have to watch them to see whether there is a cover to create cells within India having been trained by ISIS. The fourth thing is that as a terror group, they engage in such brutal acts that they think that this way the civilians will be overawed. There is a group in Iraq called Yazidis. They actually, when some of them came to India, they said, we originally think we came from India. Our practices are Hindu practices. The deepa that we put, the lamps that we have, they're all similar to what you have. And because we refused to convert to Islam, the ISIS, when they captured our territory, they killed all our men and they brutalized all the women. In fact, they did it in such crude and crass terms that even Hitler would pale into significance in compared to what they did with the women of Yazidis. So this brutality has brought in a lot of capitulation, and it is having a huge effect in Pakistan because Taliban already exists, and Taliban is a factor in Afghanistan. So we therefore have a situation where unless we are able to take a strong response to the ISIS, we will not be able to prevent people from getting frightened in some areas and capitulating because they don't want to go through their brutality. So what can we do? We have to therefore look at now the options. First of all, in our country, we have to establish a very strong identity. When we become a country which is just a kind of people brought together because it was convenient to do so, then that country can break up. The Soviet Union broke up because there was nothing in common between Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, or Armenia, or Lithuania. So these were brought together and they could not be assimilated. And therefore, when the situation in the world changed, Soviet Union broke up into 16 countries. India has a long continuing tradition. It's a single culture which has survived. UNESCO has now tabulated 46 civilizations that have existed since we have history, and they found 45 have disappeared. Only one is a continuing civilization surviving, and that is the civilization of India, which is continuing as an unbroken civilization. And that is because right from Kanyakumari to Kashmir, we have always regarded ourselves as one country. And we would have monks and sannyasis and sadhus going from deep south to Kashmir and from Kashmir coming to India. These are in the past. But over the years after Islamic assault and in pockets like in Goa, Christian assault, we have found that slowly the British, when they came, they sought not to try to control us physically, but they sought to control us mentally. And therefore, they abolished Sanskrit and brought in English. Then they changed the curriculum and they wrote new history books. Macaulay was specially sent for that purpose. And slowly we began to develop an idea that we are not one people. And all kinds of ideas were fed into our people and tried to create separateness. One was the theory that originally the whole of India was occupied by the Dravidian population. Then from Khyber Pass, from Europe, came the Aryans, and then they attacked the Dravidians and drove them south. And in India, there is now two communities, Aryans and Dravidians. And many people believed it. In South India, in fact, to be more exact, in Tamil Nadu, a new political movement started called the Dravidian movement. And they rejected everything that was common to North and South. They said, we don't accept Rama, he is an Aryan from the North. And we think that Ravan was our king, Ravan was our god, he was the Dravidian god. They didn't know that Ravan also came from the North. He was born near Delhi in a place called Noida. There's a village even today there called Basrak village. You go and see there, they put a board also, this is where Ravan was born. His wife Mandodari was born in Meerut. Then after that, Ravan went to Mansarovar and did tapas. and Lord Shiva gave him a boon. And with that boon, he looked around India and he found that his cousin, Kuber, had really beautifully built up Sri Lanka. So he went and captured it, and he became the king of Lanka. And Mr. Karunanidhi used to celebrate Raman Leela when we were celebrating Ram Leela. Of course, soon I convinced him by showing Tamil Ramayana. There's a Tamil Ramayana also written by Kamban. And I showed him, and finally, slowly, he gave up the idea that Raman was his god and king. But he never forgave. Rama. He said he's a northerner. He came from Ayodhya, and therefore he became hostile to him. I remember once when I was arguing in the Supreme Court against the rupture of Ram Setu, which he proposed through the Setu Samudram project and was supported by the UPA government. And I spoke in Parliament, in the Supreme Court about Ram Setu, how old it is and what is the proof for it and all that. So he got very angry, and he issued a press release that who's Swamy to call it Ram Setu? Did Ram build it? Was he an engineer? Which engineering college he got a degree from? This kind of thing he tried to ridicule Rama. But next day he fell sick and he had to be admitted to hospital, and the hospital's name was Ramachandra Medical Hospital. So ultimately Rama will bring him to his senses, I'm sure, by these. But this is how the mind was poisoned. Today, the modern science, that is the theory of genetics, which identifies people by DNA, shows that we are all the same people. Whether it's a North Indian, South Indian, East Indian, or West Indian. Our DNA is the same. There may be some physical differences due to special weather conditions. For instance, if you live near the equator, the pigmentation in your skin turns your skin darker than if you live in a cold climate. But that has got nothing to do with race. Race is decided by the tissues in your body and the blood, and that gives you what is called as the DNA. According to DNA, all are the same. North Indian, South Indian, East Indian, West Indian. Even the Northeast, where there has been not Chinese influence. Wrongly people think that the Chinese, they look Chinese. They're not. They're Thai people who adopted Hinduism. And there also the predominant share of the DNA is the same as ours. Brahmins and scheduled castes also have the same DNA. Brahmin, scheduled caste, whether Brahmin, Kshatriyas, Vaishya, all this varna, which was never based on birth. It was based on a division of labor and the discipline you adopt. If you are a Brahmin, you had to give up weapons, you had to give up wealth, you had to give up land. But you had to pursue learning. But your society will give you a great deal of respect. And that's how the Brahmins were born. Not born, were created in the sense you could be born in one family and still become a Brahmin, like Vishwamitra was born in a Kshatriya family and became a Maharishi. Vedavyasa, who wrote the Mahabharata, his mother was a fisherwoman. Kalidasa was a Vanavasi. And similarly, Valmiki was born in a Dalit family. But he wrote the Ramayana and became a Maharishi. So this was the factual position. But the attempt was to try and divide us and make out that somehow the Varna system is racially based and North Indian, South Indian differences, all this. Hindus and Muslims also have the same DNA. And I can test it for any Muslim who challenges this. And that means that all Muslims are predominantly those whose ancestors are Hindus. And in my opinion, there are people who privately accept that, yes, that is in fact so. Farooq Abdullah once told me that his great-grandfather was a Saraswat Brahmin. So I asked him, why don't you say it publicly? So he said, are you mad? The mullah will kill me. So there is this attempt to try and segregate the Muslim. And therefore we have to today, in order to be able to be effective against ISIS, we have to somehow see that the Islamic population of India recognizes, they may have differences with us, but it recognizes that they are also part of the same soil as what we call today as Hindustan. So this DNA is something that we have to put across to our country. We have to tell people that the identity of an Indian, which in Sanskrit we call as asmita, is that of this country's great tradition. You may call it, instead of Hindu, you may call it Hindustan. Hindustan meaning Hindus plus those others who acknowledge that their ancestors are Hindus. Together we form the country called Hindustan, which is not, Bharat is the name of our republic. But the identity, the asmita of India is Hindustan. And these divisions which have been created during British rule have to go if we have to fight effectively against the foreign terrorist organizations. So I would say today that when we think in terms of options, the first thing is to unite the country. And the uniting of the country, we must forget all these divisions which have been accentuated. Even language. Today, the moment I say Sanskrit, people say that's a communal agenda. But Sanskrit is now being learned in America. Why is it being learned in America? Because NASA found that in the future, when we start storing knowledge in the computer, the most computer-friendly language in the whole world is Sanskrit, and they have adopted Sanskrit as the language for this thing. And people are learning Sanskrit in Germany, people are learning Sanskrit in schools in Britain, and even in China, there is now a great surge of people learning Sanskrit there. Sanskrit is a very scientific language. Its vocabulary is there in every language of India. Some have more words, some have less words. Tamil, which is considered as something separate, has 43% words which are from Sanskrit. Even on this, once I had a quarrel with Karunanidhi. And he told me, no, but Tamil is a separate language, it is our ancestors. So I told him, if it was so, then why is your name Karunanidhi? That's a Sanskrit, Karuna and Nidhi are Sanskrit words. And he was not able to explain it.